Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about software architects. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, have you done any work as an architect, and do you think that architects managing 40 to 50 engineers have any time to code? Well, depends on what you mean by architect. Yes, I've done architect work in a sense, but I've never been. Like, it's never been my title to be like system architect, because the companies that at least in my region, when we say architect, we basically mean you have a fairly high level role. It doesn't. We actually have a term called engineering manager at the companies that in my region, where like engineering manager is like you manage developers at scale basically, whereas the architect is more planning out like the roadmap for companies and things like that. You don't really have person like human resources type of role. You don't have a human resources role. It's still an administrative role, but it's coding related without that responsibility. So the most amount of developers I've had under me in terms of like me being responsible for them is a team, two teams, something like that. So it's not like I've ever had 40 or 50, but I do work with a very close friend of mine who is he's my engineering manager, and he has about that amount. And I can tell you this: it's difficult to even get 2 minutes of his time, because 40 to 50 people, an engineer like doing that is, yeah, you don't have any time to code. I can promise you that, practically. The reason why I can say that is because he never has any time to code, and every time we actually see each other, he tells me that, yeah, well, I do some code. He has to code in his spare time to get any coding done. And if I just look at myself, and I can tell you that the amount of meetings I have with just a handful of that, like a fraction of that, is enough of a process to bring me down to like 50% coding. If I'm lucky, certain weeks of my time it's like fairly non-meeting heavy, and then I get to like 80% coding. But as soon as you slap on lead something or anything that is above software engineer, then you can basically forget that you have any like as much time to code. It's really just levels of hell here, like how little do you do. And in some weeks for me it can be down to like I don't have any time to do any coding, because I have to be part of as a domain expert in like planning meetings or things like that. And whenever that happens, it really is like you sit there pretty much and just listen, provide input, technical expertise, all of this sort of stuff that it's well, you consult on matters, if that makes sense. And as an architect or like an engineering manager, that's sort of that's the whole job at that scale. And I mean, 40 to 50 engineers is an enormous amount of people for one person to manage at any given time if you want to do something more qualitative. And incidentally, as you probably have figured out, if you have 40 to 50 people that you are responsible for, where is the coding fit? Like, what is the coding actually part of your responsibility? 40 to 50 people is the sort of levels of like responsibility where, that's a bad class in school for the teacher to manage, and they don't actually write the books that they are teaching. They just lecture. Same thing with any manager. If you have 40 to 50 people under you, I can basically promise you that you have no time to do other things than manage them. It's not. It's probably, yeah. Just leaving it there. It's probably not something that you're gonna do. But as I said, it really comes down to: do you really need to code anymore? Have you decided to leave coding behind and sort of move into more administrative work? Yes or no? So my coworker, or like my friend and I, we've talked about this before, and he very accurately, I think at the very least, said that I have gone a little bit too far for my liking from the coding, because to be a effective software anything, if you have that title, you have to at least keep in touch with the communities and so forth, because otherwise you're going to be, well, you're going to stagnate at some point, or you're going to be out of touch with how to do IT. And nothing is as useless as a software manager or an architect or something like that that doesn't actually know how software works anymore. And that creeps up on you if you have too many meetings. So if I were to give you any advice on, if I'm assuming you're asking now, so because you want to, you've probably been offered a job, because that's a very specific number, 40 to 50 engineers and time to code and like so forth and so forth. I would advise you to ask yourself this: am I doing this temporarily because it's going to grow me as a person? Because it will grow you as a person to do this. It's a completely different perspective on how to do things. Or am I moving on in my career doing something new? Because if you are doing that, you should start switching your focus. Your mindset should go from that, hey, I am a coder and an architect and so forth, to I am a manager of people. The reason why you should do that is because there are people who get to be in that role through being software developers first and then growing into that role. And then there are people who are like, they're in their mid-20s and take on the same role because they've studied in school to become that thing. And the thing that is very important there is that you understand where your value comes from. That is key. Because as I was saying, when I talked to my friend, he said that he's a little bit uncomfortable with it because he knows that now that he's transitioned into a manager type of position and not just a software developer, his market value actually dipped a lot in terms of hireability at the very least. His salary is higher, of course, because he has more responsibility, and that is the way of the land, right? The way of the world. But he also knows that the demand for engineering managers and so forth is not as high as for software developers or like so forth and so forth. And the pay, there's a difference, but at the same time, a manager can be, depending on circumstances, a manager can be moved like nothing, and you might get fired or like you be replaced or so forth for all kinds of reasons in any software company. It's not that common that happens for the developers. The developers are pretty stable because of they are the engine that is driving the whole thing forward, but the managers are usually more disposable. And so the risk with that is that you might find that it's difficult for you to find a management job, and at the same time it's hard for you to get back to the just coding because you've lost the skills. And that is why it's actually it can be dangerous for you if you're not ready to make that switch to become a full-time career manager type of person. So you should really consider that. So what I want you to take away from this is that I can basically guarantee you that you have no time to code if you're managing 40 to 50 people. And I know that for a fact because I manage like a tenth of that, and sometimes I have no time to do coding. I have enough time to do coding that I do it on a weekly basis, but not every day sometimes, because there are like so many things going on and so many meetings, and I have to mentor people. I have to help out with extra difficult questions, or talk to other teams, or like all this administrative work that comes with the lead title, something, whatever you are. If you're a senior, it doesn't matter what it means in your company. And so if you have 40 to 50 people under you, I can promise you the idea is not for you to manage code or like write code. You're there to lead. That is what you, with that sort of number. And I can tell you, based on one of my closest friends' input on this, he's been doing it for a few years now, and he says he has no time to code inside of work hours. And he's a little bit uncomfortable with it because he still wants to keep in touch with the tech part and not become like a purebred manager because of the potential risk. Like, it's not a risk if you really embrace it and become a really good manager, but there is a transition there that you should be aware of, that you're basically trading one role for a different sort of role, and there are pros and cons with that. And I like to say to people, if you're unsure if you want to be a manager or not as a software developer who's like going up through the ranks, get yourself a trial management role, which is usually a tech lead or a team lead or something like that, where you manage like a small amount of people or so forth, or you're responsible in some way, so that you can do 80-20 or 50-50 like myself, for example, for coding. The reason why that is very useful is because that will give you one leg to stand on in the management area, and it's going to give you one leg to stand on in the engineering area, which is very useful because that means that you get exposure to both worlds. So if you want to make the switch to become a manager, you can, because you have at least some experience doing it, as long as the skills are of quality. But you don't lose your coding skill, so you can still go back. And then when you have made your decision, or you feel like, yeah, one thing is better than the other, then just step over and you're done. Have a great day.